Welcome to episode 109 of Rebirth Revolution. My name is Melissa Olson. During the rebirth, we are to examine all the systems that have led us to where we are now. We need to look at them with a critical eye so that we may make the necessary changes that will result in moving to higher levels, both as people and as a collective culture. To that end, there are countless offerings out there that help us see into places that we had not previously had access. We are tasked with using that information to rethink and reinvent the way that things are done. One such offering that I consumed this week was the documentary series The Way Down, which can be found on HBO. The full title is The Way Down, God, Greed, and the Cult of Gwen Shamblin. It's a fascinating look into a cult that became famous for the woman who ran the show, Gwen Shamblin, and her creation, The Way Down Workshop, which taught people that they should think of God instead of food when they were hungry. She equated thinness with holiness. She was certainly not alone in elevating thinness to a level of godliness and the sum total of someone's value. There are many who worship their bodies in this way and often use their size as the only metric that matters when measuring how they are doing as a person. It has been said that your body is a temple, but it was never meant to be your entire religion. Of all the metrics one could use to measure their worth, body size is probably the most ridiculous. It says nothing about your level of honesty, integrity, empathy, or humility. It is probably the least reliable indicator of what your spiritual awareness level might be. But it is the one that you can see with the naked eye, so it is the easiest to gauge. The really important parts of who you are happen to be harder to intuit. Her message was well received by some. She started this in 1986, and by 1998 there were 21,000 classes taught and 250,000 participants worldwide. Her book about this concept sold 1.2 million copies. So anyway, she talks a bunch of people into this line of reasoning and bludgeons them with her requirement to be super thin. But as is always the way with cults, it gets much, much darker. In 1999, she started a new church, Remnant Fellowship Church. This is where it went from a diet strategy into full-on end-time madness. She saw her connection to God as being one that required complete purity and obedience, which she required of her congregants. As it is with cult leaders, the rules apply to her underlings and not so much to her. She dumped her husband of 40 years and took up with a young actor fellow, one who was as much of an opportunist as she was. Her original husband was not thin, so he was certainly not on brand. The new guy was filling out the photogenic couple image that I guess she hoped for. So she sees this need for the congregation and the church as a whole to be super pure and obedient so that God will not make anything terrible happen to them. There is a death of a child in her family, which she knows her family did nothing to earn, so she starts investigations into who in the congregation may have done something that God would be mad enough about to punish them by killing their child. It all got very dark and very crazy. Of course, everything was in place to keep the women submissive and the children obedient. Even though a woman headed up this church, she had men who would make sure that women and children never thought they had any rights. They were all taught their place. I have never seen a story of a cult where it doesn't get darker and more crazy until it reaches some sort of horrible conclusion. But I get that. No human should ever have that kind of power. They cannot handle it. And no one should ever give over their power to someone who wants that kind of power. It will never end well. Spoiler alert, this story isn't over. The cult members have not been freed, nor have they come to their senses. I'm sure there is much more darkness to come. The most disturbing part of this documentary, for me, was the church's position on child abuse. They support beating children with glue sticks and wooden spoons to keep them obedient. Obedience was a very big part of this church's identity. Beating children is just plain wrong. It is cruel and ignorant and the laziest form of parenting one can engage in. The lifetime of damage that is done is heartbreaking. There is no healthy way to process the fact that the people who are supposed to love and protect you are the ones who are your greatest threat. There is no way for a child's mind to not be warped when those they put their full trust in abuse that gift. Beating your children does not result in better children. It results in damaged children. Their belief is that God is demanding obedience from everyone, and that it is the role of the parent to beat that obedience into their children. They also believe that children are evil little demons who need and crave these beatings. That is such a sick mindset. But the issue of obedience frames a fundamental difference in how they see the world and how the system is designed. The Creator, in their minds, is looking for any reason to punish those who defy his demands, even the demands that they can't quite put their finger on. Their Creator is cruel and capricious. Their Creator assumes the worst about everyone because, remember, they are all sinners. The system is something else entirely. It is predicated on the fact that instilled in each of us is a desire to grow to a higher level, doing better as we know better. The people in Gwen's church have that same desire. They know they want to do better. They are just pointed in the most ridiculous direction possible. The system knows that children are souls who chose to come here to do more work. They may come here as a soul who is at a higher level of awareness than the parents, or from a lower level of awareness. They will all need to be reminded of how life in this school works, because they are not born knowing that. We are their guides. They will teach us more than we can ever teach them, and what they teach us is of more importance. We can teach them how to color and count, but they will teach us love, compassion, and hopefully patience and perspective. The most egregious proponents of violent child-rearing techniques will use examples of children suddenly behaving and telling their parents they love them after they are beaten. They see that as a win, but it's not a win. This is a child who knows that they have to depend on these people for their very survival, and they know that they better act a certain way if they want to survive. That is learning a survival technique. It is not learning how to make their own decisions once given the information that they lack. Thinking about this topic led me to rewatch an opera from 1994 about spanking. It is as tough to watch now as it was back then. There was a couple who had 2 daughters, aged 2 and 4. These parents had sticks in each and every room of the house, as well as in the car, to hit their daughters with. They were ready to strike everywhere at all times. To them, this is a religious thing. They rely on a passage in the Bible, one that many believe is misinterpreted, that tells them to inflict corporal punishment. They say that it works. This is insane because if hitting them with sticks worked, they would have only had to do it once. They wouldn't have to do it many times a day. And they even admitted they hit one of the little girls 5 nights out of 7 to get her to go to sleep. Oh, God, imagine that. I remember wondering at the time if they thought that these same girls, who they profess to love, should expect that their husbands will beat them when they are no longer under the authority of their parents. When do the beatings stop? What if they do something their husband doesn't like? Can he beat them with sticks too? It's crazy. They felt that the fact that they held their children after beating them and told them how much they loved them, it was just a beautiful bonding moment. Imagine twisting a child's mind to believe that violence and love are the same thing. Twisting their minds to believe that the people who love you the most are showing that by hitting you with sticks. These parents never hit their children with their hands because they said hands are for loving. They only hit them with sticks. So I guess that they thought their daughters were dumb enough to not understand that their hands were used to grab the sticks and swing them. Another crazy line of thought was that it was okay to hit your kids, just not when you were mad. This is, after all, loving discipline. But if you are able to calm yourself and then later hit the kids, there is something terribly wrong with you. It is time to stop pretending that hitting kids is for their benefit and not just an outlet for a flash of anger. We can do better. The church in this documentary would fall under the category of an evangelical church. Evangelical churches want to beat blind obedience into everyone. They want everyone to fear their Creator and for the children to fear their parents. They want everyone to bow down to authority. This is why they are flirting with authoritarian rule for our country. This is why they don't care to preserve democracy. They want Big Daddy to have all the power and tell them what they can and cannot do. This is their comfort zone. This is the hierarchy they understand. They have been taught that this is what their Creator wants and demands of them. The complexity of being human and their own well-being is not a part of the conversation. They pretend to have it all together so their Creator and their minister will think they are worthy. Of course, behind the scenes, they are all just being messy humans. The emphasis is not on owning who they are and moving in the direction they need to. The focus is on being blindly obedient and hoping that those with the power are fooled by their presence and their tithing. But that is not what we are shooting for here. We are here to evolve individually and as a culture to a place where we are capable of being kind and loving to one another, to a place where people are not housing tons of damage that was done to them in their childhood, a place where we can focus on growing to higher levels instead of expending our energy trying to overcome what has happened to us at the hands of people who had more power than we did, people who had the power and abused it. We are evolving to a place where we do not treat those we profess to love worse than we treat anyone else. We are evolving to a place where we can share wisdom with others of any age, and a place where we can receive wisdom from them too. We are here to be responsible for our own spiritual journey, not to accept the word of some of these money-grubbing charlatans. They do nothing but impede and reverse your growth. This particular church, which is still active, lets us see that there are many who are still not ready to take on their own spiritual work, their own personal growth. They are not ready to do that yet. All they are ready to do is to be a living example of where we no longer want to be. Thanks for returning for another week of Rebirth Revolution. I really do appreciate your weekly return. It's important to rethink all of this stuff that has been the way it's been for generations. A shout out to all the young people who are deconstructing it and sharing their experiences being raised in these cults. It's a lot of hard work for them to break it all down and rebuild a life and belief structure that is not damaging to them. Most of them have to break ties with their families, which is the exact opposite of what I assume these parents were trying to do. The next time you read a letter to an advice columnist about children who never come around, think of what they must have been through. Relationships that aren't built on mutual respect and trust will never stand the real test of time. You can always let me know how you're doing by emailing rebirthrev@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Rebirth Revolution can be found on all the podcast apps, the music apps, and full episodes are found on YouTube and our Facebook page. Let someone know about us. I'd appreciate that. Until next week, check out The Way Down if you can. Think about what you were taught that no longer applies. Get vaccinated if you haven't already and wear a mask. And find some old Oprah shows on YouTube. They're amazing. Remember, you're loved exactly as much as every other person on the planet, not 1 ounce more or 1 ounce less. Stay strong and safe and firmly in your own spiritual lane.